Throughout the week, you're inundated with news, the heavy-duty kinds. So since it's the weekend, we thought we'd bring you something different. The odd, the offbeat, the outlandish stories that didn't make it to the headlines. Welcome to Beyond Bizarre. Suffering comes in many forms, and for the Chinese, it takes the avatar of what they call white people food. What are we talking about? Here's a report. The lunch of suffering. This meal shows what it's like to be dead. Even my rabbit would kick away this food. Harsh critique, and for a change, it doesn't come from Gordon Ramsay. These profound words belong to the people of China, who are trying certain foods and letting their innermost emotions run free, which range from anger to sheer horror. And what kind of cuisine are they talking about? White people food. Seriously, that's what they're calling it. Because people in China are jumping on a new trend. They're trying out European and American style lunches. Think veggies, crackers, cold cuts, boiled eggs, and the occasional piece of fruit. They're calling this white people food. Because why not let the label be just as basic as the food? And after what they call suffering this food, they're going online to express their critique quite unabashedly on Chinese blogs. Now, we know what you may be wondering. This food sounds quite healthy. There are vegetables involved after all. This may be considered good food in another part of the world, but to an average Chinese person, this cuisine is absolute misery. They're used to labor-intensive food, which involves a mix of vegetables, meat, and grains, and a bunch of different spices. But here they are, people spoiled by an explosion of flavor, now eating cracker sandwiches with just cheese and ham inside them. And frankly, looking at the pictures they've posted, this food looks quite sad. But this expansive, horrifying food tasting is more than just an online trend. It's representative of the grudging acceptance of so-called simple eating, and it finds its roots in China's work culture, which is grueling. Most workers in China follow the 996, which involves working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. It's crazy, but also quite normal and pervasive in the country. The 996 doesn't leave much time for the preparation of elaborate meals. So the youth of China is now trying, albeit with difficulty, to accept this kind of cooking. And a lot of them say that this trend may have made them suffer, but it also helped them save time, money, and a lot of calories. And this may sound depressing, but a lot of users online are saying that it helped them introspect too. The result? They realize that the point of eating is just to keep oneself alive. Now that may be one side of the argument, and it does highlight the benefits of adapting to such food, but many aren't convinced. One commentator said, if such a meal is to extend life, what is the meaning of life? So, what do you think about this so-called white people food? Let us know. We'd like to hear from you. And speaking of white people, an American man, a DJ to be specific, loves traveling. He's visited over 193 countries, and now he's taking his passion to another level. He set up his own nation in California called Slowjamastan, where Crocs are banned. Our next report tells you more. I ran out of country, so I created my own. These are the words of Randy Williams, a DJ from San Diego, now known as the Sultan of Slowjamastan. Williams spent his life visiting every country in the world. Now, with only one unrecognized nation left to visit, Williams thought about this future game plan. So he created his own country and named it after his radio show. He bought an 11-acre plot of arid land in California, officially declared independence from the US, and began the leadership of his country, the Republic of Slowjamastan. But with great power comes great responsibility. Ruling a nation is tough, but it can also be fun when you make the laws. And the laws here are nothing but bizarre. Williams has outlawed the wearing of Crocs. Punishment for violation: the authorities forcibly remove a Croc and beat the offender over the head with it. Sounds odd, but it's as simple as my country, my rules. It's been 2 years since Slowjamastan was created. In this time, it claims over 500 registered citizens. 4,500 more have been conditionally approved. The nation-state issues its own passports, prints its own currency, and flies its own flag. Now that Williams is about to complete his goal of traveling to every possible nation, he's inviting tourists to visit his own country. But the next stage for the Sultan sounds a bit tough, even for him. He aims to gain recognition of his nation's secession from the US. It isn't going super well. Despite emails and DMs to President Biden on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and MySpace, these messages have been left unread. Apparently, even sultans must deal with DM troubles. The job market is a tough battleground, and finding a job is hard. But do you know what's harder? Quitting, especially when you work in Japan. This has spawned a new industry in the country, where agencies will resign from a job on your behalf. What are we talking about? Here's our report. This is Toshiyuki Niino. Some years ago, he was unhappy at his job, so he wanted to quit. Sounds fairly simple, right? But Niino couldn't muster up the courage to confront his boss. No, his manager wasn't atrociously wicked. He didn't have devilish horns and a pointed tail either. But he was a Japanese boss. And that's something worth considering here, because Japan has a harsh work culture. Quitting your job in less than 3 years is a big no-no. It's met with resistance, to say the least. We'll get to more of that later. Essentially, Niino's anxiety was understandable, but it also contributed to some introspection. Few human experiences are unique, and many people experience ill treatment while quitting a job. There's guilt and shame. And Niino thought about that. So, like any other youngster in today's day and age, he let his heartache transform into, no, not art, but an entrepreneurial idea. Now, Niino and his childhood friend, Yuichiro Okazaki, have their own startup. It's called Exit. And it helps people avoid the ordeal of quitting their jobs, because Exit will do it for the people. In other words, they offer a one-way ticket to escape the guilt trip involved in resigning from a job, for a fee of $144. What does Exit do? It contacts the client's employer, informs them of their decision to quit, and helps with the follow-up process, allowing the employee to avoid anxiety-inducing confrontations, which, by the way, aren't limited to introverts. Exit was launched in 2017. Since then, about 24 companies have adopted the idea, leading to the birth of a resignation outsourcing industry in Japan. Today, there are tens of thousands of people using these services. Exit receives about 10,000 inquiries each year. And experts say this is all thanks to the Japanese work culture, where quitting a job is seen as a big mistake, even a sin. The culture promotes the idea that success requires long-time commitment, so lifetime employment was the norm throughout the 20th century in Japan. But that is changing now. Even so, the Japanese change companies less often, In fact, the average length of service at a Japanese company is 12.4 years. It would, of course, be ideal if the Japanese people felt comfortable being their authentic selves and quitting jobs if they needed to. But until that happens, the resignation outsourcing industry will continue to provide a valuable service to people. And while this idea is quite interesting, we wouldn't put it past Japan to eventually install resignation letter vending machines. That's all for this episode of Beyond Bizarre. Join us again next week when we bring you stories that are anything but basic.